topic. Thank you for being here. This is an interesting one indeed, especially since we're in Scorpio for this cycle. So for those of you out there who don't know me, I'm Natalie Kent, creator of Sacred Business, the Natural Cycle Planner, the Sacred Money Blueprint, and the Creator Types. Now, I've planned this workshop today in the theme of partnership based on my personal experience with collaboration over the last more than a few years. The last few years of building my business through partnerships with people and collaboration has been extremely illuminating. But it wasn't my first dabbling in partnership really, because I was a project manager for 10 years in the IT health industry, and I worked in a health coalition that incorporated local councils and universities and private and public health services together. And that was really my first taste of how partnership could work in practice. And one thing is for sure, it's always messy. Partnership is never clean, and it's just a matter of figuring out the muddy waters as you go. So we can have all great intentions, but really it's kind of just through trial and error that we find what works and what doesn't in each partnership, because of course every partnership is different. So I'd love to know from those of you who are here today, are you currently in any kind of business partnership at all? Or are you here to learn about how to create partnership in your business? Which camp do you fall under? Now, just a little housekeeping. You can type in the comments by clicking the chat box down below. And it's really helpful if you do, because we can all interact as I'm speaking throughout the call. You can ask questions and I will be answering those questions live as we go. So don't be afraid to interrupt me as I'm speaking, because often I forget to come back to questions if we leave them till later. But I will be making time for questions at the end of the call. So for those of you who are not familiar with Zoom, we just keep everyone on mute just for background noise. And we also want to make sure that we have a pen and paper handy, because this is going to be a very hands-on workshop where you'll be writing lots of notes about your own business, how you might be able to apply what I'm teaching live on the call. I'll be checking the chat box. Thank you, Priscilla. I have partnered, but not currently. Yes. Okay. So some people may have had experience in partnering, but haven't, maybe it's not something that they're doing at the moment, but have an interest in it. So I hope to teach you some things that perhaps you hadn't thought of today. Now, just zooming out for a moment to the broader natural year. So most of you out there are familiar with the Natural Cycle Planner, which is essentially based on this diagram right here. It's about looking at the 12 themes or functions that are required to operate a business. And of course, being nature-based, we look to the elements, the 4 elements that help to guide us, and what those functions, how those functions need to play out in our business and when. So we use the zodiac as a universal way of tapping into what function to focus on or prioritize at each time of the year. So, oh, Jane, I too have experience in multidisciplinary health and education sector. Great. And you're a self-employed yoga teacher. Okay. Me and my husband are now setting up a yoga studio here on our property, and we'll be embarking on many collaborations and partnerships with other teachers and healers. Wow, that's great, Jane. That's a very interesting journey that you're embarking on indeed. So I'm very keen to hear your questions today, especially. How exciting. Cool. All right. Well, keep the comments coming. I will be checking them regularly, and I'll read them out where I can so everyone can see and hear them. And also for the people who are listening to the recording as well. All right. So just to put this particular theme of partnership in perspective, where we're at in the whole natural cycle of the natural year. We're currently in the 3rd quadrant, or the 3rd quarter of the natural year, which means we started off with seed in March, the start of the natural year in Aries. We moved to roots, and now we're in leaves. So Scorpio and partnership is about branching out, supporting others, being supported. And last month we focused on networking, the theme of Libra. So we're really building on that theme of networking this month to deepen the connections that we identified in the last cycle. So I'll be sharing some more about how we can build upon your network on this call today. So just getting a sense of where we are in the natural year. We don't follow necessarily the calendar year when we're going through this natural cycle process. We are finishing the natural year in March next year. So it kind of gives us a bit of extra time in a way. We don't have to finish on the dot around Christmas. We keep going for a couple more months. Okay. Adi, I'm glad you're here, calling in from a restaurant in Manhattan. How exotic. Sounds very exotic from where I am in Brisbane, Australia. So glad you could make it. All right. So each cycle, each workshop, I start with a natural timing tip. Last month's tip was sun and moon transition. It was about being awake and aware at the end of the cycle each day, in the beginning of each day's cycle in the morning when the sun rises. So we're kind of continuing that with that theme actually today, because the tip that I wanted to share with you is dream time. Now, what I mean by dream time is, you might have heard this term used by Indigenous cultures. They refer to the dream time, which is essentially their story of how the world works or how the earth was created. And it's about dreaming into being what we want to create. And the tip that I wanted to share is about waking up in the morning when you are coming out of dream time. This is a very critical time of your day. Now, if you're like me, you might have a tendency to reach for your phone, switch on your phone, see what the messages are, get the brain ticking very quickly. That's usually my tendency to do that, but I use discipline to not do that in order to stay in the dream state a little longer. And you might have had the experience of when you wake up in the morning, your dream, your most recent dream, is actually front of mind, so you're more likely to remember it than perhaps a dream you had earlier in the night. So the purpose of this time is to not short circuit the process by starting your day immediately, getting stuck into technology or anything that is actually going to take your focus immediately away from that dream state, because there is magic in that state when you're transitioning from sleep to awake. And you can get wonderful soul guidance from your soul at this time if you just stop and pause before you begin your day. And some people I know have morning rituals that last a couple of hours, so there's no technology that comes on or any interaction with any human for a couple of hours each morning. You don't have to go to that extreme, but half an hour can make all the difference in setting up your day more intuitively to align with that unconscious knowing of how your soul wants your life to unfold. So why do we do these natural timing tips? Well, we do this because natural timing is the underpinning, it's the personal mastery of the natural cycle planning process. It's your ability to tune into what actions to take and when. Now, this is a combination of an intellectual process and an intuitive process. It is not simply, I go with what I feel when I feel like it, and it's not I plan everything and follow my plan to the detail. This is a balance of both. This is a balanced planning process. And natural timing, your sense of that natural rhythm, is what is going to help you to grow your business in the cycle of a tree through organic growth. Sustainable growth. So with that said, let's get cracking on natural partnership. Now, a few definitions or just to cover what the scope of this call is about. Partnership can mean many things in business, can take many forms, and we're not being rigid in the definition of partnership today. So we're not necessarily talking about co-ownership, but certainly could include that. This is just about partnering with others in business for mutual gain. So you can have affiliate partners. You might want to explore joint venture projects, which have a short-term, like a start and an end date to them. A strategic alliance could also have a start and an end date, but it's different in nature to a joint venture. And of course, co-ownership. So if you want a business partner, this is certainly going to be relevant today. What is natural partnership really about? Well, in nature, we look to nature to simplify everything. In nature, there are examples of partnership that is based on exploitation. So this is the way that unnatural partnership, in a sense, actually plays out in business when we are driven by our ego's agenda, and there's an aspect of deceit that goes on where two parties aren't showing up with being truly honest and open about what they're bringing to the table. And this can result in a power struggle and is really based on self-interest. What can I get out of this partnership? We touched on that last month with the theme of networking, where if you're networking with someone, if you're in conversation with them, what exactly are you wanting from that? Are you wanting something for yourself, or are you genuinely curious to understand what that person does in business and how you might work together? So in nature, there's actually a great example of this kind of exploitation of traditional partnership, where the cuckoo bird here in Australia is known for stealing other birds' nests. So what they do is they actually fly into another bird's nest, another species, and remove the eggs in that nest to lay their own. And then the host of that nest actually ends up raising and feeding the cuckoo's babies. Now, I love this example because it's such an exploitation of another species, another being that is vulnerable, none the wiser, so to speak. So this is something that we just want to be mindful, because a lot of partnerships are based on this kind of attitude where I just want to gain and I don't want to give, and I certainly don't want to negotiate a mutual arrangement here that benefits us both. Then we also have natural partnership, which is a little bit different. So you might be aware of this example in nature where the green sea turtle has little surgeon fish that swim along beside it and actually clean its shell as it's swimming. Now, this is a beautiful example of a mutual arrangement, a mutual benefit, where the turtle is benefiting from having its shell cleaned and the fish are benefiting from being fed. So there's two different objectives here, but both parties are winning. So let's just keep that in mind as we're going through some examples today, because this is a wonderful partnership in nature that we can all learn from. It's based on self-empowerment, so both parties aren't trying to exploit the other. They're being truthful about their agenda, and there is a win-win. So it's very much a case of being aware of what the agenda is of both parties when they come to the table in partnership, being completely transparent about that. So natural partnership is essentially about true collaboration. The first question to ask yourself is, are you a whole entity? We're going to discuss this in the first section on blind spots. Are you a whole entity coming into this partnership, or are you a broken entity, or an entity that has some open ends or some frays that need attention before you even consider partnership? What is your agenda? Now, there's a light and shadow aspect here. So you might be very conscious of what your agenda is, but there may also be a shadow agenda, an ego agenda that is in play. And also, what do you bring to the table? Being very aware of what you offer the partnership, not having what can I get from this partnership at the front of your mind. What are you offering the partnership that is of value to strengthen the partnership? Very important. So, starting with your blind spots, this is where you are looking for patterns of behavior. So in partnership, you have two entities coming together. And you can see these two circles here, they're broken, they're open. And that's the point of weakness in these two entities coming together. This is potentially your blind spot. Now, I really want to emphasize this because I've had more failed collaborations than I have had successful ones. So I've learned over time that blind spots can absolutely derail, completely sabotage the collaboration from the get-go. And it's only a matter of time until that breakdown occurs. So blind spots can look like money patterns. We're looking for patterns of behavior. In your business, what are your patterns around money? If you look at your profit and loss statements, if you look at your cash flow statements, if you look at that rise and fall, the flow of money in your business, what is that pattern telling you? So as a business owner, the money flow going in and out of our business is a reflection of how we flow with money, how we flow with life, and our relationship with money. So this is a very operative thing in any partnership, is any money shadows that you are coming into the partnership with will be amplified. So this is something that I've had to learn the hard way, and I keep learning it because it's amazing to me how, we always have blind spots. So that never changes. However, we can actually approach any partnership with the understanding that there are always blind spots and we need to lay them out on the table for everyone to see. So I'll say that again, your weaknesses that you bring from your own business and yourself to any partnership will be amplified in the partnership. So what often happens is people come into partnership hoping that their blind spots or their weaknesses in their business will be repaired by the partnership. Quite the opposite, actually. You will just get to know them more intimately, and there could be a disaster at hand as well involving the other partner. So we just want to go in with open eyes and looking at what is your ego's agenda. Now, I mentioned this before, but this is also key, and I've done this myself. I've gone into partnership with someone or a collaboration of sorts, exploring a potential partnership. And what has happened is that I was actually more about, well, what do I want this to be? What do I want this partnership to be, rather than I am in service to this partnership? Big difference. Being in service to the partnership changes everything. And we'll talk about that in a moment with strategic alliances and what that looks like. But it's a good question to ask yourself, what is my agenda? What is my hidden agenda even? Because the ego will be at play somewhere, somehow, and we just want to make sure it's exposed. So you can ask yourself, as well as money patterns, what have your previous attempts at collaboration shown you? What went wrong? What was your part in what went wrong, or why it didn't get off the ground? There'll always be some pearl of wisdom in there. Whether it was it's not about laying blame or fault, it's actually still looking at the pattern here. So something to reflect on. What went wrong in your previous attempts at partnership? What is the flip, Gillian? What is the flip in commitment to the partnership? I'm not sure what you mean there, Jill. You might have to explain what you mean about that. Happy to answer it though. Previous attempts at partnership, money patterns are the two big ones. It's because your previous attempts at partnership are what is indicating the patterns in your own behavior. So how you relate to others, how you enter partnership, how you front up, how you interact with people, how you negotiate. So it's very revealing about you first and foremost. There's a third area you can look at blind spots in your business, and that is to ask the question, what is not going well right now? What is not going well right now in my business? So again, we're looking for this gap in the circle, this broken bit that doesn't necessarily need to be healed, but it certainly needs to be transparently put on the table for the other partner to see, and vice versa. Gillian, when I go into partnership, commitment to the servicing the partnership and find less commitment on the other side. Oh, okay. So I think what you're saying is that you're very committed when you enter a partnership, but you're finding that there's less commitment on the other side. This is a very good question, and it's something that we'll be talking about more in detail. But briefly, if you're finding that you're more committed than the other person, my instinctual response to that, and also from experience, is you don't understand what they want yet. You haven't found out what that other person wants from the partnership in order for them to commit 50-50 with you. So they're holding back. They're like, oh, I could take or leave this. I'm going to sit on the fence. I'm not really, there's no buy-in. So what's going to make them buy into the partnership? You've got to get into their psyche and dig a little bit. So this is something that Scorpio teaches us all, is to look beyond the obvious. This is why partnership and bonding is the Scorpio theme for business, because it requires us to get psychological about how we approach people, to really think about their motives, what motivates them, to think about the why behind partnership. I'm not sure what you mean, not until sometime. It tends to look good for the first 30%. Okay, you might have to explain that too, Jill. Sorry, but I will be talking more on this a little bit later. So let's end on that question with your blind spots. What is not working well in your business right now? There may be several areas that are weak. Looking for those weaknesses. Okay. This is what happens when you put two broken circles together like this. There's nothing to keep them together, is there? That broken link in the chain is going to come to the fore at some point, and both parties will break apart. Okay, so this is a practical step now. Your potential partners. Your potential partners, and you may remember this from last month's call, the networking call, where you actually mapped out your network. So you are at the center, your business is at the center of this little diagram here, and you're putting people that you know, other businesses that you know, on these circles, around the circle, like so. I used some of the people who attended last workshop and put them on this diagram. So the ones who are close to you are the ones who are very resonant with what your business stands for, what it's offering. The ones further out on the outer circles are sort of in the field, but not really closely aligned at this point in time, your business and their business. So we're going to take this a step further and actually look for potential partners within your network now. So what we want to firstly ask is, what's the common theme that we're looking for with other potential partners? So for example, for me, sacred business, nature-based business. I'm looking for nature-based businesses. So I actually have a few right off the top of my head because they've either been clients, so these people can be clients, they can also be colleagues, people who have a nature-themed business in some way. So I would actually do this diagram with the common theme of nature theme. Here are the businesses that share that theme. So you can also, as the commonality, Jane, can you repeat that question? What is the common theme that you're looking for with potential partners? So for me, it's nature-based. So I've got Cherie, who does New Roots coaching for people who are newly separated or divorced, and she uses an entire nature-based framework for that. I have Nikki Hanning, who's the creator of True Mindful Beauty, who creates organic beauty products from scratch by hand. And they're both very nature-oriented businesses. So I feel an instant resonance with them. I'm looking for high caliber, high quality businesses who share that theme. And as you can tell, they're not business coaches. So they're disparate businesses to me. So they have a different audience. However, that's going to be the overlap in the center. They're both nature-based businesses. Now, you can also look for a common desire. So for example, and we're going to flesh this out a little bit later. For example, a common desire might be with Cherie, who's a divorce coach. I want to help divorcees start a business or build their existing business after separating from their partner. She, on the other hand, might actually like to make her, empower her existing divorcee clients in the money front, so actually helping them to make more money so they're perhaps able to pay for her services. So there's lots of different angles we can take here, but we're really, again, putting our X-ray vision goggles on for Scorpio and looking beyond the obvious, looking for those commonalities. What's behind the scenes of some of these businesses and what you share in common? So Cherie and I may simply share a desire to help divorcees. That's what we share, but we help them in different ways because our core business is different. So looking for what is your shared objective. And when we get to strategic alliances, and I'm going to explain what this means a little bit more in a moment, we can do partnership in lots of different ways, as I've said, but we can maintain our independence, like this diagram, two circles that have a bridge between them. And that bridge is what you have in common, and that's your communication, and that's what the resources that you share between you. Or you can create a third entity together. And this is where the co-ownership comes in. So this could be a business that you both share ownership of. It could be a project as well. It doesn't have to be a business. It can be a project for a finite amount of time. But it's very important to actually understand whether you are creating a third entity or not. So a strategic alliance in strict terms is not creating a third entity. They're not having a baby. They're just two people with two organizations with something in common, and they stand to gain from that relationship. And that's something that they've negotiated together. But they're not merging in any way, and they're not creating anything that they jointly own. So there's two different ways you can go about this. And having that clarity is important from the outset. You know, what are we creating here? Are we creating something that we jointly own, or are we simply creating an alliance? So what do you want from each other is the operative question here. What do you want from this other entity, and what do you want from the partnership? Now, I should mention here as well is that when you come into partnership with another entity, you often, and this goes for any partnership, romantic partnerships, friendships even, you often have to sacrifice something in order to become stronger as a team. So, for example, and this is a very trivial example, but it still matters in the scheme of things, because these are the little ego clashes that can derail any partnership. So my collaborator, Sarah K. Jones, with Sovereign Business, in our partnership, she is the graphics, visual, beauty person. She does all of that. She is better at it than me, even though I love to do it. And I do it in my own business. I do all the graphics and all the visuals in my own business, or mostly. But in our partnership, I don't do that. It's something that I love to do, that I've sacrificed for the good of the partnership, because she's better at it than me. Now, as I said, it seems little, but all of these little things add up. Because at the end of the day, you have two egos working together. You know, as much as you might be working together for the highest good, for the good of the partnership, there will be times when the ego starts to become friction between the two egos. So going into the partnership, understanding, I have to give this thing up for the good of the partnership, is so important. Again, eye on the prize. What's going to benefit the partnership, not what's going to benefit me. So, any questions, comments, thoughts at this point? I'm just going to pause for a moment. It's been a lot here. Some of you look very deep in thought, which could be a good thing since we're in Scorpio. We're going deep. Digging up the shit, I like to say. That's what Scorpio does so well. Goes to the murky depths that no one else wants to have anything to do with. They just prefer to keep it in the dark. Okay. So, next, your resources. This is where we're going to do a bit of a resource inventory. When you have two entities coming together, each one, of course, has assets of various sorts, assets that could benefit the partnership. So we must know what those assets are, and the other person in the partnership must know what those assets are, because that's going to help us to devise a strategy to use them to achieve our mutual goal. So there are generally three kinds of assets or resources that we bring to the table in the form of people who we know. Could be our customer database, our mailing list, certain localities where we know people, or we know how a locality works, even that extends beyond people into the area of on the ground knowledge. Also, people can include existing partners, so other collaborations, other partnerships that you already have in place. They also could be very valuable to this new partnership. Knowledge. So you might have two entities that have subject matter knowledge, subject matter experts, as they say. So if you have two yoga teachers coming together, well, you're going to get some overlap where they both have shared knowledge, but you're also going to get a lot that isn't shared. So they might be trained by different schools of yoga, different teachers, whatever. That is potentially very valuable to the partnership as well. So you want to look at the subject matter that has drawn you together and what you each can bring to the table. You might also have knowledge about different markets. So if the two businesses if one's working in one location, one's working in another location, you've got two locations. Knowledge of two locations, how two markets work in that case. And also knowledge of previous partnerships. What has been your experience that you bring to the table of your previous partnerships, successful or unsuccessful partnerships? So as a project manager, every time I complete a project, I do a lessons learned report. That was something that was drummed into me in my training, is you never finish a project until you've completed the lessons learned report. Now, every failed or successful collaboration should have a lessons learned report, because there is so much gold that if you've had a dabble in this area before, you can derive from what's worked and what hasn't. And that is a valuable resource to bring to a new partnership. Don't forget that. And it should be spoken to, if not in writing, ideally in writing, for all parties to see. So you can take a moment now to start to, if you haven't already, what people, knowledge, and materials do you have as assets in your business now that you could potentially bring to a new partnership or an existing partnership? And if you have a partner in mind, think from their perspective. What would they value that I have? So in the area of materials, you can think of very, simple things like I have access to this venue, or I own this building, or I have this software subscription, or I have these practical tools. Like if you're a massage therapist, or a yoga teacher, you might have a range of tools that you use in your work that could potentially be shared. Other materials are, of course, money. If you have capital, that can be valuable too. Licenses and intellectual property, any trademarks or proprietary content that you have can be also used. And one that probably is undervalued is time. Now, when two parties come together, one may be time poor and one may be time rich. So they may trade their time, the one who's time rich may trade their time for the resources that the other party brings to the table. That is valuable too. They may be putting in more hours into the business because they can, and the other party is bringing something that's a resource that's not time-based. Okay. Now we're going to actually put all of this together, because this is about you actually walking away with a bit of a strategy where you can take steps now, if you like, to initiate partnerships. Now, I do suggest strongly that you have an existing relationship in most cases with who you're approaching. So the network diagram we did earlier, these people in your network, if you are considering them as potential partners, I wouldn't suggest approaching them cold with this approach anyway. You can initiate conversation from a networking perspective, but I would start there before you even consider partnership. How well you know each other and your existing relationship with that person can be a make or break. Sometimes it's, you know, an existing partnership or friendship or relationship with that person can be what breaks the partnership, because there's so much conditioning or an existing underlying dynamic that is so ingrained that it's not even in your awareness to bring to the table. So it's a massive blind spot. And likewise, working with someone completely cold who you don't know, then it's a wild card. It's an unknown quantity. So I will strongly suggest spending time to get to know that person, know their business, know how they run their business. Don't make assumptions about anything. I've done that many times. Coming into partnership and with a whole range of assumptions I didn't even realize I had. And that's what ends up derailing things. Ask questions, do not assume a thing in this process. So let's put it all together. First thing, what's your objective? What do you each want to gain? Now I'm going to go through these. This is with an example from my own experience in creating the True Abundance Oasis with 3 other business coaches. We started last year, and we started this collaboration with a very different intention to what ended up happening, which is often the case with these kinds of things. But I'm going to start, you know, give this example of how we started anyway, just so you have some context. So the objective, what do you each want to gain? So when I came together with these other 3 business coaches, one of the objectives that we shared was to increase the success rate of our clients who are business owners. So what we were each discovering is each of us had a limited perspective, limited skills. Often our clients actually needed more than one coach, one, you know, skill set in order to build a business. But, you know, once we finished working with them, they were sort of left out in the world trying to find that next person. So we had this shared desire to educate our clients from all of our perspectives. So each of us bringing our knowledge of business building to the table, and each of us had strengths in different aspects of business. We did a skills inventory to see who brought what to the table. And that was our intention. We just want our clients to have a higher chance of actually making money, especially people, you know, just starting in the startup phase of a business. And we felt that coming together was going to be, you know, a big help for them in that. In the process, of course, the self-interest was, well, we become more successful when our clients are successful. So whatever business you're in, your customer's success is your success. So while they're being successful, as long as they're being successful, you will also be successful. And this is something that we wanted to increase for each of us. Weak spots. Here we go. What's the break in the chain? What are your current weaknesses? As I said earlier, what isn't going well in your business right now? So, as I said, with our foursome coming together, we had one of our weak spots was some of our clients just weren't making money. They were struggling to make it past the startup phase or even get through the startup phase at all. So that's something that we had to look at in ourselves and go, okay, so how are we contributing to that? So for example, I looked at myself and went, okay, so I can see now in the context of these 4 coaches, 4 of us together, that I don't have their skills in marketing. So my clients having access to their skills in marketing helps us all. So that's just one example of a weak spot. And sometimes it takes the context of another person or people coming together in this way for you to see what your weaknesses really are. Oh, I'm actually not as good as that person in this regard. I'm not as good as I thought I was. And I've seen this not just in myself, but in others in our collaboration, where that context, without that context, we would never have known, just operating in silos. Resource inventory. What you each bring to the table. So this is what we just covered. So for me, in coming into this partnership or this with these other coaches, I had access to Australian clients and an understanding of the Australian market. I had an existing curriculum and existing like actual marketing, not marketing collateral, but teaching collateral, as did the other coaches. But of course ours was different. I also had software subscriptions that ended up being used in the partnership as well. So rather than us having to buy new subscriptions for the partnership, we just shared what we had. So it's really that simple. It's simply an inventory at this point, because the next step is strategy. Oh, how will you use your resources to achieve your goal? This is what it all comes down to. Strategic alliance is simply this question. How will you use the resources that both parties bring to the table to achieve what you both want? So in our situation, it was we created a meta, or we intended to create a meta curriculum to educate our clients. So we were bringing together all of our content and our teaching resources and our expertise to create a much bigger, more powerful, more comprehensive resource for our clients. So you can see that underpinning this whole approach is that collectively, when we come together in this way, we can be more powerful than standing alone. And there will undoubtedly be people that you know in your network now who you could be benefiting from having a conversation with, just to test the waters, see what might eventuate. In my experience, partnerships and collaboration is not something that can be forced. So I like to look at partnership and collaboration as midwifing creation, because it helps me to bypass my own ego's agenda of what can I get from this partnership, or what do I want, or it's about me, or, you know, my ego is feeling tender and fractured because I feel insignificant or, you know, less than this person, or, oh my God, now my actual skills are in the context of another or others. It helps me to see, well, what is this really about? And if you manage to find others who have that similar intention and that attitude to partnership where, okay, we're just opening our arms here and going, how can we help in a bigger way? Great spirit. How can we be of greater service when we join forces? So I like to say, in summary, that truth plus resources plus strategy can equal collective power. So you are more powerful together than you are alone. That is the goal here. So definitely a Scorpio theme of transparency, of power, of being open and honest, and also digging in deep to find what might be sabotaging us beneath the surface. All right, how are we going for time? Let's have a look. Good. Does anyone have any questions? I'm going to keep going and actually do a little planning session for this month of Scorpio using the planner. If you have to go, that's totally okay. This will be recorded and you'll receive the recording on email. But I'll certainly be here to answer questions and to go through this planning process for the month. Has this been useful? Has this been helpful for you in understanding partnership and getting a sense of how to approach potential partnerships? Yes, good. Great. This is kind of a deep thought session today. It's not like super interactive like Libra was last month because this is where we need to go. We need to go deep into thought, self-reflection, where we haven't been before. Okay. All right. Perfect for me right now as I'm just embarking on a partnership. I think that's you, Tegan. That's great. And Michelle, yes, it brings things to the consciousness. Good to be aware of things you've discussed. Wonderful. Okay. Let's look at this month. So this month of Scorpio, as we've now understood, is about joining forces and using our resources strategically. So this isn't just about using our own resources strategically, it's about seeing what else is out there, what other people have in their little kit of wonders that they use in their business, and seeing how we can put them all on the table to share together. Jane, I know you have to go, Jane, so I'm going to answer your question. Our question is rising about value, how to value each skills and time. I think this is a big shadow issue for me that catches me out where I've not felt valued in the past. Yeah. Wonderful. Very Scorpio oriented, given that Scorpio can often feel powerless and like they lack self-worth. So rather than feeling powerful, they feel underpowered. And so this is primarily, my instinct is that it's about you first and foremost and how you value what you bring to the table. Often what happens is when we don't actually put our resources down in writing, we don't actually see what we have of value. So that would be number one. Make sure it's in writing and you've really thought about it in detail, like explained the value of each thing you bring to the table. Because when you value it, it will be seen as valuable from whoever's coming to join with you. But there is, of course, some negotiation that needs to happen here too, because you don't know what the resource mix is going to be. So, you know, as you say, there's skills and time, there's so many other things here, and you've got to sort of mix things around and see what's going to work best for the partnership. So if you're working with someone who has that attitude of, okay, so I'm here for the good of the partnership, not here just to serve myself, I'm here for the good of the partnership, then they will value what you bring to strengthen that partnership. If you take nothing else from this call, that's it. is the person that you're aligning with there for the good of the partnership, or that third entity that you're potentially creating? You know, really question that. Because if they're coming in with their own ego's agenda, it will come out, and it does get messy. It'll come out eventually. It always does. So it really helps to articulate, well, what is the good of the partnership? What is the goal here that's beyond our own agenda? You know, having a higher purpose. Okay, it's really about, I want to teach more kids yoga. You know, I want kids to benefit from the magic of yoga, more kids to benefit from the magic of yoga. That's why we're coming together. That's our commonality. Does that help? Cool. Yeah. Jillian, I think that answers my previous question. I know what I'm bringing to the partnership, but I'm not clear on what they are bringing. Yeah, not what I see, but what they are actually putting on the table. Exactly. This is a tall order for many of us, is to be transparent about what we can bring to the partnership. Because, you know, sometimes we may not be prepared to share certain things. Sometimes we may not even see that we have certain assets. Sometimes we don't feel safe in the partnership because we might feel that the other person is going to exploit us somehow. Like the lovely cuckoo. The cuckoo bird. What are they really going to steal from under my nose when I'm not looking? So trust is so important in any partnership, but so are the actual facts. Facts create safety too. This is not just an emotional thing. The facts of, here's what I bring, here's what you bring. We can see it. It's black and white. There's no grey. There's also no hidden, you know, unknowns that might derail us down the track. Here it all is. And of course, we never know everything. We're never going to know everything coming into a partnership. But what we can share is the same intention of being transparent and being in service to something greater. Cuckoos tend to be bigger in nature and have a clear agenda. They have a very clear agenda, yes. It's just not a shared agenda. Okay, great questions. Keep them coming. Oh, Jane, do you have models of communication to deal with challenges as they arise? So in my experience, my limited experience, what has worked well is what I call a mutual understanding. And that's where you share things like, okay, so not just what am I bringing to the table, but what are my weaknesses? You know, having all of that in writing from the get-go. So those 4 points that I shared earlier, having that in writing from the start is kind of like your go-to when things go awry. So if something doesn't go as planned, or some, you know, shit's hitting the fan, then you can actually sit down with that document that you both wrote at the beginning and say, okay, does something need to change here? Simple as that. No accusations, no playing the victim, no pointing fingers. It's literally, do we still agree with this, or does it need to change? So I like to keep things as simple as possible. So I'd stick with those 4 points and put them in writing. Make sure that you both write it. You both, are involved in the process equally. And then you might even say, okay, well, this is our go-to when things go wrong. And this is how we decide that we're going to approach any possible problems. Does that help? Cool. Okay. So we're being a detective this month. That's what being a detective means. in Scorpio. Looking beyond the obvious, looking for the saboteurs in ourselves that we bring to our business. And this month, there's not much going on astrologically, so we don't need to focus there. But we do have a Scorpio new moon and a Taurus full moon. So for those who are not aware, when the moon is waxing, so we're moving towards a full moon, the energy is rising. So the emotional energy in us all is building towards a crescendo. So the crescendo is this full moon here on the 4th of November in Taurus. So anytime there is a Taurus and Scorpio linking like this, it's about power. In Taurus, it's about material power. Scorpio, it's about emotional power. So we get a double whammy. So this is just something to be aware of because, yep, your shadow around power is going to come up around the full moon because the full moon illuminates what we have not previously been able to see. And it will also illuminate what you're doing well, you know, where you're feeling strong, where you're feeling powerful. Then after the full moon peaks, we start to wane down to a new moon on the 18th, which is in Scorpio. So new moon in Scorpio. So that's a more subdued time when we're really looking into ourselves. So in terms of business, the bulk of your work or anything that you're doing that's of significance in the public eye, so putting work out there, new offers, new launches, any kind of public presentation that you're doing, ideally is around that week of the full moon when the energy is high. But keep in mind that people will also be challenged around that time too. So people can tend to go crazy on a full moon. If it's got anything to do with Scorpio, then they tend to go even crazier. So just be mindful of that if you're doing any kind of work that involves emotions, psychology, inner work. Just be mindful of that. And just in terms of buying patterns, around the full moon, people are more inclined to buy simply because their emotional energy is heightened. But they also, depending on the full moon, what kind of full moon it is, they could be inclined to make poor decisions, poor buying decisions as well, because their saboteurs may be at play or derailing them around that time. Yeah, Gillian, the extreme ends of the experience. That's right. Material power, emotional power. So when it comes to planning, I set my intention for this cycle. This is just an example for you all to help you to tap into your own intention for this cycle. What do you want to get the most? What do you want to get out of for this Scorpio theme of partnership? So for me, it's to explore opportunities to increase the reach and impact of my soul work. So that is absolutely going to involve looking at who's in my network. It's on my list. Develop my strategic network. So I've already started mapping that as I instructed you to do today, using the circles with the common theme. So who am I looking for? What do we share? Also, licensing of the creator type. So this is the month of power. So it's about protecting your assets, valuing your assets. So the creator types is currently a system that is not protected in any way, but I do plan to license it next year. So that's just the early stages of that. Inviting guests to Facebook Live show. So once I develop my strategic network, I'm going to be very deliberate in hand-picking people who have, depends what my objective is with this Facebook Live show, we'll see. But it's just an example of how you might use those partnerships just to get the ball rolling, you know. So you're not necessarily partnering straight away, but you've deliberately chosen that person for the potential of a partnership down the track. So does anyone have any questions about their own actions, intention, anything at all about this cycle? It took me a while to tune into my cycle, intention and actions this month, because, you know, Scorpio requires a bit sort of deeper insight than the other months. And you're also wanting to be strategic. So Scorpio doesn't like wasting time, and certainly is very deliberate about, okay, this is what I want, and this is the shortest route to get there. I'm not going to do any detours. I've got my eye on the prize. That's the Scorpio mentality. And a healthy Scorpio is transparent about that. Okay. All right. So that's really it for planning today. So if you've enjoyed this, you can check it out on, check out the Facebook group, the Instagram page, the natural timing hashtag. We've got a Google Calendar. There's lots of things going on around these natural cycle planning workshops. So it's a time where we can check in each turn of the cycle. So once a month, I offer a workshop on a different theme to help you to plan for that month. Jillian, I was lucky today as I had my coaching session with you yesterday, and this made today easier. Good. What made it easier? Was it having an intention, having a goal? Scorpio loves to know the purpose. Yep, that's it. Cool. All right. Thank you everyone so much for coming. And I'll be in the Facebook group. If any questions arise after this call, I'm more than happy to help. So till next time. Taurus loves to know the purpose too. Yes, they both do. Okay. Mwah. See you next time.